/S. I'd been on the job long enough to know that some calls just didn't sit right. That particular night, the dispatch came in like any other, vandalism at the old Miller farmhouse. But there was something in the way the caller's voice cracked, like he was holding back more than he was saying. I made a note of it as I pulled up to the scene. The place was dark, save for the moonlight cutting through the skeletal trees. No signs of forced entry, no obvious damage. But then I saw the tire tracks, fresh ones, cutting deep into the dirt like someone had been in a hurry. I knelt down, running my fingers along the tread. These weren't just any tracks. They matched the pattern on that black SUV we'd been seeing around town lately. The one linked to the county's drug trade. My gut tightened. This wasn't just about a busted window. This was a message. I radioed it in, but dispatch was quiet. Too quiet. Then the voice came back, calm, professional. "Deputy, we've got a possible connection to the fool around and find out operation. Be advised, they're armed and unpredictable." I exhaled slowly. That's what we'd started calling the drug ring. An inside joke, dark but fitting. Because if you messed with them, you'd find out real quick what happened. I stood up, scanning the shadows. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and something else, fear. I knew then that this wasn't just another call. It was the start of something bigger. And if I wasn't careful, I might be the one who ended up finding out the hard way. It was a routine traffic stop that turned into anything but. Adarius Taylor had been driving like he had the devil on his tail, swerving between lanes, speeding through red lights. When I finally pulled him over, his hands were shaking, his eyes darting like a cornered animal. Something wasn't right. I could smell it before I even approached the car, the sharp, metallic tang of blood. My gut twisted. "Step out of the vehicle, sir," I said, keeping my voice steady, my hand resting near my holster. He complied, but slow, like every movement pained him. That's when I noticed the red smears on his shirt. Not his blood. Inside the car, it was a scene I'll never forget. The back seat was soaked in it. Not just blood, but something else, thick, dark like oil. The air was thick with the scent of copper and something sour. And then I saw it. A baby. Tiny, wrapped in a blanket, tucked between the seats. Alive. Barely. My radio crackled. "Deputy, we need an ambulance at your location. Now." I hadn't even called it in. The dispatcher must have heard the edge in my voice. I reached for the child, my gloves slipping in the mess, my fingers trembling for the first time in years. Taylor was on the ground now, sobbing, his hands cuffed behind his back. "I didn't mean to," he kept saying. "I didn't mean to." I didn't look at him. My focus was on the baby, on the rise and fall of its chest, on the way its tiny fingers curled around mine. The paramedics arrived, their voices sharp with urgency. They took the child, and for a moment, the world felt too quiet. Taylor's sobs echoed in the silence. I exhaled, long and slow, and realized my hands were still shaking. Not from the blood, not from the fear, from the weight of what I'd just seen. Another call, another life, another story that would stay with me long after the ink dried on the report. /S. The call came in just after midnight, another domestic disturbance. I'd dealt with enough of these to know the drill. Tense voices over the phone, the weight of fear in the air. But this one was different. By the time I arrived, the scene was already spiraling. I crouched behind the squad car, my breath steady, my hand resting on my holster. The house was dark except for a flickering porch light. Inside, I could hear raised voices, something shattering. Then a gunshot. My pulse kicked up, but I kept my voice calm over the radio, calling in the shots fired. Sheriff Grady Judd was already on his way. I knew what that meant. Judd didn't just react, he dominated. He had a reputation for taking charge, for making sure his deputies were held to the highest standard. And I respected that, even when it meant getting chewed out for something I couldn't control. When he arrived, his presence filled the space. He didn't raise his voice, but there was no mistaking the authority in it. "Report," he demanded, his eyes sharp in the dim light. I gave him the facts, what I'd seen, what I'd heard, what I'd done. He listened, his expression unreadable. Then he turned to the team, his words deliberate. This wasn't just another call. This was a potential hostage situation, and we need to handle it like one. His critique wasn't personal, but it stung. He didn't say I'd failed, but I knew he was thinking it. That was Judd's way. His expectations were high, and he made sure you knew it. But that was also why I trusted him. He pushed us to be better, even when it meant standing in the fire with us. By the time the SWAT team moved in, the tension in the air was thick. Judd stood at the perimeter, watching, his posture rigid. I could feel his gaze on me, but I kept my focus on the task, because that's what he demanded. And in the end, That's what kept us all alive. I remember the day we started digging into Taylor's background like it was yesterday. The precinct was quiet, just the hum of computers and the occasional clatter of a keyboard. I sat at my desk, squinting at my screen, scrolling through years of records. Taylor had been a ghost before that night. No priors, no known associations, nothing that screamed danger until it was too late. The first red flag was his financials. Clean, too clean. No debts, no credit history, just a few deposits here and there. Cash, always cash. No paper trail. My gut tightened. A man like that doesn't just appear out of nowhere. I called in a favor from the state's financial crimes unit. They ran his prints through every database they had. Came up empty. Then there were the rumors. Taylor had been a drifter, but not the kind you see on the side of the road with a sign. He moved from town to town, never staying long enough to leave a footprint. A gas station clerk in a podunk town near the border remembered him. Said he bought a map of the county, asked about the old ranch roads. That was the only lead we had. I pulled up satellite images of the area, zoomed in on the back roads he'd been asking about. There was an old hunting cabin, half collapsed, nestled in the pines. It wasn't much, but it was the only thing that made sense. I called in a warrant, but by the time we got there, the place was abandoned. Just an empty whiskey bottle and a single boot print in the dust. I stood there, staring at that footprint, knowing we'd missed him. Again, the wind carried the scent of pine and something metallic, oil, maybe, or blood. I couldn't shake the feeling that Taylor was always one step ahead, like he was playing a game we didn't understand. And that's when I knew this wasn't about money or revenge. It was personal, for him, and maybe for whoever else was out there, watching, waiting. /S. The air was thick with the weight of what we'd found, what we'd all seen. The house was quiet now, the kind of quiet that follows a storm, but the echoes of that little girl's screams still rattled in my bones. I could feel the eyes of the neighbors on us, some peeking through blinds, others standing on their porches, faces pale, arms wrapped tight around themselves. Kids who'd played with her were being pulled inside, their parents' hands firm on their shoulders, like they could shield them from the ugliness that had just been dragged into the light. I sat in the interview room with the girl, her small frame swallowed by the too big chair. She was quiet now, her tears dried to streaks on her cheeks. I kept my voice low, steady, like I was talking to my own kid. "You're safe now," I told her, and she nodded, but her fingers twisted in the hem of her shirt, her knuckles white. The social worker was on her way, and I prayed she'd be gentle. This wasn't just about the bruises or the marks. It was about the way her eyes kept darting to the door, like she expected someone to come bursting in and drag her back. The next few days were a blur of reports and meetings, but the thing that stuck with me was the way the community reacted. There were vigils, flowers left at the end of the driveway, people bringing food to the neighbors who'd been too afraid to say anything before. The school set up counseling, and the principal, a no-nonsense woman with a sharp voice, told me, "We're not letting this break her." I appreciated that. Kids are resilient, but they need people to stand up for them. And the girl? She was placed with a family out of town, somewhere safe. I checked in on her, just to make sure. Last I heard, she was doing okay. Not great, but okay. That's all you can hope for, sometimes. I remember sitting in that courtroom, the air thick with tension. Adarius Taylor, just a kid, really, barely 18, stood there in an orange jumpsuit, his eyes darting between the judge, the jury, and the prosecutor. I'd seen this look before. Fear, defiance, a desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, things wouldn't go the way everyone expected. The prosecution laid it out neat as a pin. Adarius had been caught with a firearm, one stolen from a pawn shop. He had a prior record, juvenile stuff, but enough to paint him as a repeat offender. The prosecutor was good, real good. She made it sound like Adarius was a ticking time bomb, that the city would be safer with him locked away. But I knew different. I'd met his mother, a single parent, working 2 jobs, trying to keep her kids off the streets. Adarius had been in and out of foster care, bounced around like a basketball. He wasn't a monster. He was a kid who'd been dealt a shitty hand. The defense attorney did his best, but it was an uphill battle. He argued that Adarius was a victim of circumstance, that he was trying to protect his little brother from some gang members who'd been harassing them. The jury leaned in, some nodding, others frowning. You could see the doubt creeping in. Then the judge spoke. The verdict was guilty. The sentencing? 5 years. The courtroom erupted. Adarius's mother sobbed. His little brother, no older than 12,